tonight. This week we're talking about election observing, and we've got a group called the Scrutineers that are joining us this evening. I'm very excited to get to know these folks and see how they're working in the election observing space. We know that with the especially the last few elections and the last national election for sure, the idea of election observing and identifying issues within the election process has become much more important. So the Scrutineers work at the intersection of voting, the voting rights movement, election transparency movement. So we're really excited to have them here with us. They work to make sure that everyone qualified to vote can vote. So that's another great thing, and make sure that those votes are counted accurately. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Emily Levy with the Scrutineers. And Emily, please tell us about yourself and how you got started in Scrutineers. Oh, I think you're on mute, Emily.
You'd think I would have learned that by now. Thank you, David. And thank you, Sarah, and everyone from the people for inviting Paul and me here today. As they said, I'm the founder and executive director of Scrutineers. We're about a 2.5-year-old organization, though I personally have been involved in this work since 2004, when I volunteered with the Election Protection Coalition in New Mexico. They're the folks that run the 866 Our Vote election problem reporting hotline that you may be aware of, and it was my job to enter the problems that people called into their system, and boy did I have my eyes opened by that process. And I just have been involved ever since in trying to make sure elections are fair. For me, it really, the kernel of it goes back to being a child who didn't like it when things weren't fair, and that stayed with me my whole life. I started Scrutineers 2.5 years ago because there really wasn't a place for people to go who were newly interested or concerned about the security of our elections, wanted to do something about it, needed to know more in order to take action, and needed help knowing what they could do. And so Scrutineers, we're an online community, and we've got a membership site where there's lots of training material and opportunities for conversation. People can make posts in there, like in Facebook or something like that, and respond to each other, so we really can have conversations and help each other learn and take action to make our elections as trustworthy as they can be. So I'll leave it at that for now. Tonight's presentation is being made by one of our most active members, Paul Burke, who I know has also been involved with the people. So Paul, do you want to take it from here?
Okay. Yeah, as Emily said, I've been active with the people. I'm a member of the House of Delegates and also active with Scrutineers. So it's a nonpartisan organization like the people, and I'm really glad to be able to come here and discuss this all with you guys. So let's, Emily, if you can start the screen share, we have some slides. We'll go through those, and then we'll have open time for discussion. A lot of people think of elections as pretty simple. People vote, the votes get counted, the winners are announced. Let's go on next, a couple more slides. There we go. But it's not quite that simple. You probably know the more people learn about elections, the more they understand how complex elections are and how hard it is to get them right. So the people who run elections have really challenging jobs, especially now when they're under attack by people who don't want every voice to be heard. Most of the people running elections believe in democracy and the right to vote, and they're doing their best. This training is part of Scrutineers' After project, Act for Trusted Election Results. Many people volunteer before Election Day. Some of you are probably doing that, and on Election Day. Then they go home and wait for results. So this training, we cover what happens after the polls close, how you can help ensure the votes are counted fairly and accurately by observing at your local election office. People are concerned about elections, may crowd into election offices without knowing what to do. We need to come together to make sure votes are counted fairly and accurately. The script and slides are on scrutineers.org, and we'll email a link, or Sarah will email a link afterwards so you can refer to them. Here's what we'll cover today. What happens after voting ends, why observe, when you arrive to observe, what you'll see and look for, how to report any problems, how to prepare, and a conclusion and next steps. People do election observation without any training at all. Try to go with a buddy, even if your buddy doesn't get trained, but the more you know, the more effective you'll be. So I'm really glad we're here today. What happens after voters leave the polls? At polling places, poll workers have procedures to follow to close up shop. While you may be able to observe at a polling place on election night, in most cases it's more useful to observe at the election office or wherever the votes are coming in from the polling places and being processed. Throughout the processing, election workers must make sure they don't lose ballots, double count ballots, or permit ballots to be changed, or let anyone tamper with the election computers. Now I'm going to show you a poll question. If you don't know the election workers personally, how accurate do you think they'll be doing their jobs? So there we go. There's the poll question. So choose one response and click submit. I'll give you 20 seconds or so. Well, I think that's most people have answered, so we can, if there's, is that everybody seeing the results? I'm not sure what everybody else is seeing. So it looks to me as if everybody chose the middle two. Nobody thought everyone's going to be completely accurate. People trust the poll workers going to be mostly accurate, but some mistakes or different ways of framing that. So that's in fact what we find when most of the times we do this training. So that's the most important reason, one of the most important reasons to observe. So why observe? Do I have to close this or, okay. There are three major reasons. We just talked about the first one, to catch mistakes. Election offices are often underfunded, understaffed, which makes it even harder to get everything right. If you've ever had a job where you were expected to do more than you could possibly do, you probably felt the urge to cut corners. Observers being present while the votes are counted will help workers resist those urges, make sure procedures are being performed well. It's important to document issues in case follow-up is needed. Number two, get problems corrected. If you see problems, you may actually be able to get them corrected. Later, we'll tell you who to talk to get issues fixed. Number three, observers protect election workers from false allegations of problems. Your factual documentation may be helpful if false allegations occur. It's not just you correcting mistakes, it's defending the election workers against false allegations. And many election workers will recognize this and welcome you. You're the eyes of the public. If you're observing as accurately as you can, whether you're party affiliated or not. As an observer, you can help increase public confidence in the fairness of the election. Here's a real life example of observers making a difference. In the California primary in 2016, observers were watching vote processing in Los Angeles County. In California, the Democratic Party allows independent voters to vote in their primary, but they had to, which I know is an issue very near and dear to a lot of people in Scrutineers, the ability of independent voters to vote, but they had to use special ballots. Election workers were incorrectly processing these ballots in a way that was not counting the votes for president. The observers were able to get the count stopped while the supervisor figured out what to do. The supervisor agreed it had been an error, corrected the ballot processing procedure, including going back over the ballots that had been processed incorrectly. As a result, An estimated 66,500 votes for president were counted in the presidential primary that would not have been counted if those observers hadn't been present. 66,500 votes in one county. So it could be you who prevents a huge mistake like this in the future. Even when problems are corrected, it's important to document what happened, and in some cases share it with others, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Now we'll go through the steps involved in doing actual observing. We'll use as an example, observing the arrival and initial processing of votes, like I mentioned, on election night after the polls close. These processes continue at least into the next day. If you can't observe until later in election week, you'll see other parts of the process, but most of what we cover will still be useful. When you arrive anywhere to observe, you may need to sign in, introduce yourself, and ask staff who you should pose your questions to. Stay respectful. You'll see more and catch more issues with honey than with vinegar. I mean, that's certainly the general approach of the people as well as scrutineers. Be thoughtful about not taking too much of staff's time. Ask staff if you can take photos and video. Greet other observers you see, and as the day goes on, see if you can make allies of them. While you're observing, take notes. Notes will help you remember what you see to discuss with others. Write your notes right away, since additional events may make it hard to remember the details later. Print copies of a form, and we have a form like on scrutineers.org, or you can take note paper. The main things are to note the names of people, what happens, what time. It's important to keep the facts separate from any opinions you write down. Even if you don't know what people you watch should be doing, watching and listening will teach you. Video is by far the best way to document what you see, though some places don't allow it. Video preserves memory since things happen fast. You may not realize until later the importance of what happened. If a video isn't possible, an audio recording may be allowed and helpful. If you have a smartphone, it probably has a voice recorder app, or you can download one in advance. On election night at the Central Election Office, you can expect to see staff receiving and opening boxes or bags of ballots. Even where it's an all vote by mail state, they'll be bringing in boxes or bags from the drop boxes. Possibly they'll feed them through a high-speed scanner. Most places close down the drop boxes when the polls close and they bring those in. Some votes may arrive on a memory device, like a thumb drive or a flash drive. If the ballots are scanned at the voting location, then both the paper ballots and the memory devices are transported to the central location. Other places, scanning is only at the central location, so only the paper ballots arrive. Thumb drives and other memory devices may arrive inside the scanner or inside a bag, a box, or envelope. Staff take them out, put them into the central equipment. Then you need to watch where staff put them. You may also see the election results being transferred to the public website. Major thing that election offices do when they're counting ballots. Here's some examples of what to look for. Many places require 2 people to bring in each ballot box for security, so watch how many people if you're observing the arrival of ballots. Is anyone bringing in election materials unaccompanied? Do ballot boxes arrive sealed? The seals may have numbers. Workers may have a list of the seal numbers. Before opening, does staff check the seal number against the list? Where do they look it up or write it down? How do they track batches of ballots to ensure each is scanned once and only once? Usually they move them to distinct parts of the room and they may seal them. And after you've been watching for just a few minutes, you'll see what the process is. If the jurisdiction scans ballots in the precincts, results arrive on memory devices. These are small and not very noticeable, so they're hard to track. How do they handle them so no one can substitute, miss, or double count a device? Workers from the voting computer companies are usually referred to as vendors. Do they access the election system? It's good to write down anything done by vendor representatives and ask what they're doing. They're usually the experts on maintenance, so they may indeed be called in, be there standing by and be called in when there's issues. When workers are done with the materials, either at the end of an activity or at the end of the day, how are the materials stored and locked? Write down what you see. So our voting system's connected to the internet. You undoubtedly heard in the news, there's no need to worry about our elections being hacked because voting systems aren't connected to the internet. But is it true? Well, first, almost all computers, including election computers, get security updates for Windows and all their other software. These come ultimately from the internet, and they're loaded on USB drives or CDs to go to the offline computers. If those updates contain malware, that goes into the election computers. Also, some of the voting systems in some states connect to the internet to send vote totals from the precincts to the central office. Even when a particular computer isn't internet connected, it's not necessarily safe from hacking. Let me explain. On the left, we have an offline computer, not connected to the internet. This is where the vote counts from the precincts are being fed in. You watch election night coverage, they say things like, well, 47% of the precincts reporting. You're getting gradual updates. Every half hour or so, the staff move partial results from the election computer to an online computer to post on the website, send to the state, and send to news agencies. There's a right and a wrong way to do this. Let's say results from the offline computer are loaded onto a flash drive. This is then inserted into the online computer to transmit results. Malware from the internet can rapidly infect the online computer, it's online, and create false results. This malware could infect the flash drive. They often put the same flash drive back in the election computer for this next update. So malware can follow the USB back into the election computer. That's the wrong way to transfer results. Marilyn Marks of the Coalition for Good Governance in Georgia says this is like sharing needles. The best practice is for each update to be performed using a single-use CD, a paper printout, or a new USB drive fresh from a factory-sealed package. If you can find out whatever their method is to put results on the internet, make sure to put it in your notes. Now let's talk about reporting any problems that come up. You'll need to use your own judgment about who it makes sense to tell about a specific situation. Think about things like what or who is causing the problem. Does it need immediate action? Who has the power to fix it? Is this something that needs outside intervention from a hotline, a party, or a candidate? When you came to observe, you asked the staff who you should speak to about what you see. If you see a problem, tell them immediately, whoever you were told to talk to, and ask for an explanation. Consider comparing notes with other observers, which might include your buddy, candidates, their representatives. If it still seems a problem, you can also post the issue on a website called csay2022.com, which puts issues on a map so other observers and journalists can see if there's a pattern. This is from the CSAY map for 2020. You can also call, text, tweet, email, or talk to a local group or candidate. The Scrutineers.org has links with contact information for various groups around the country. You may know of other groups in your community who would want this information. Whether you find issues or not, we'd like you to send a brief summary to any of these groups and to Scrutineers. Hearing from you will help us improve training in the future. If you see a serious problem, the hotline at 866-R-VOTE is run by the Non-Partisan Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights. There are other hotlines, other languages, which are on the website. 866-R-VOTE may be able to help you with legal guidance. This is a free service. Here's a scenario, so you can imagine how this might work when you're observing. Suppose you've been seeing pairs of workers bringing boxes of ballots to a table where others process them. Then you see one or two people bring in a similar box, put it in the corner, and leave. You watch for a few minutes, and it just stays there. What would you think you want to do? Here's a poll, and mark as many answers as you want on the poll. Different things you could do. And I'll give you 20 seconds or so. Maybe you'll have to slide down to see some of the other options at the bottom of the poll. So that's most of you. Maybe it's getting time to close the poll and show the results. There we go. So all of you said, write it down. You heard me talking about notes. Go closer, write down any labels or photograph it if you can, if photographs are allowed. Talk to your buddy or the other observers. Ask an election official. That was almost everybody. And then I'm sure the next answers depend on what answers you get from the election official. You may have to contact somebody else, post it on CSA, tell a local group. Interesting that you, of course, we can tell that the people is a nonpartisan. The first thought is to tell a local group rather than a candidate. And if it's serious, yes, you would call 866-RVOTE. So there's a range of things you can do, and let's see. Has everyone seen the results? Again, I'm not sure. I see. I think I'm not very good at this operation here. Okay, so that's the point of the training, is to let you know that there are various things you can do, depending on the situation. Here's another poll. On a scale of 1 to 5, how likely do you think it is that you would observe at the next election? For most of you, it'll be the general election. Some states still have primaries coming up, and it's all worth observing. How likely?
Sorry, I goofed that up there a little bit.
That's okay. Can we get the poll?
Yep, there we go. Okay, I think that's just about everybody.
Right, sure. Okay, so we have a range, and recognizing that not every role is for everybody, but we have 3 maybes, two maybes and 3 probablys. So, and as you hear about the news and see how your schedule looks, you can think about this for yourself, and of course mention it to your friends as an option for them to work on. Let's talk about how to prepare to observe. The rules about who can observe vary from state to state. Most states allow nonpartisan observers. Some states only allow representatives of political parties or campaigns to observe. So if you're in one of those states and want to observe, you can find a friendly candidate that you can represent. Some states have other limitations, and the website link that we're going to send you has this map where you can get to the rules on your state. The gray Wyoming is, there's some limits in the information about Wyoming on this website. If you have to do some initial steps, like signing up at your election office or through a candidate, do it soon, because time passes quickly. And if you can, as we mentioned earlier, it's good to take a buddy. Even having only one additional person helps you feel supported, gives you someone to talk with about what to do when what you see. They can watch or read this training if they have time. Next step is finding your election office website. Elections are run by counties, so it'll be on your county election office, except New England, Michigan, and Wisconsin, where the towns run elections. On the election office website, or by calling them, see what their rules are for observers, their schedule of activities to observe. If you have to stand a certain distance away, then you can prepare by having a measuring tape app on your phone. Whatever the rules are. It's good to sign up to follow the election office if they have Twitter or Facebook or some other social media, and get on their email list so that you hear about what's going on. Activities in different states that you can observe can include deciding which provisional ballots and vote by mail ballots are valid. Offices recopy torn ballots. Some states check or audit some results by hand to catch computer mistakes. And all these steps are important and good to observe. It's important to remember, even if the outcome of an election is announced election night, those results aren't final until all the steps are complete. And we have a list of what we recommend you bring on the website too. And I'll give you that link in just a minute. I want to tell you a little bit about Scrutineers that Emily is director of and that I'm a member of, as well as the people. Non-partisan. It's an online community of people who care about fair elections, want to make elections more transparent, more accessible, more secure. Scrutineers members work in our own communities around the US and help out in hotspots if necessary, usually by phone or Zoom from homes. Inside the membership site, members share information, watch videos of trainings, and how to advocate for change in your community. We sometimes have special events for members. The membership site is designed to be a place where people who care about fair elections can learn information like what we've shared with you today, connect with others, take action. The trainings about observing are available even to non-members outside the membership site. So inside the membership site, we have more in-depth training. So the link that we'll send you, you can get to without being a member. We have other in-depth trainings inside the membership site about things like the different types of voting systems and their vulnerabilities and more. And people connect with others in their own state and find more ways to take action. So I invite you to join scrutineers.org too. We charge a one-time fee of $1.99 to join, to keep the bots out of the site. If that payment is a problem for you, then contact us through the site and we'll work it out. I want to be clear, it's not necessary to become a member of Scrutineers to access the observation training. We'd love to have you if you want to get more involved. So this recording, can we get the next slide? There we go, scrutineers.org/train1. So we'll have a recording of this presentation, the slides, the transcript, and all the other links I've referred to about finding out rules in your state, what to bring to observe, and so forth. And Sarah will send this link by email. At the bottom of that page, there's a form for you to fill out to get access to more resources, more details, and let us know when and where you plan to observe. We aren't set up to coordinate volunteers, but we can send you reminders and we can follow up with you. So please complete that form. And that will also let us notify you when we add new training materials to the site. So let's recap. Here's what we've covered today. The main reasons to observe are to catch and correct mistakes and protect the election workers. And when you observe, you can report issues to the election staff, CSA 2022 and 866-R-VOTE, and to candidates, parties, and groups. We'll be offering this training throughout the year. If you have friends you think would like to take the training, ask them to sign up at that same link, scrutineers.org/train1. And if you're part of another organization that you think would benefit from this training, please put that in the chat or through the Scrutineers website and we'll follow up. So thank you. And now let's talk about everyone's questions and comments.
All right. So if you have a question, if you go to the bottom of the screen and do reactions, you can raise your hand and we'll be happy to call on you. I'll go ahead and get the ball rolling. So as an election observer, you're a nonpartisan election observer, you go on election day to watch the votes being counted. What should you do if, let's say, a partisan election observer is really acting out and being more of a distraction than anything? Are there any remedies that you should be doing, or is this something that should be handled by the election, the county clerk or whoever's running the election?
Well, I would say think of your safety and think of minimizing the disturbance. If you could, so the staff will be dealing with that, but of course they've got their jobs to do too. I would say if you can distract that person by saying something totally unrelated, like, do you know where to get a snack after we finish observing here tonight? I think you could gently try things like that. Don't get into an argument with them. Don't raise your voice, because that just creates more drama. I don't know, do others have suggestions?
I'd like to add a couple of things to that. I think those are really good ideas, and it's a great question. One thing that we suggest to people is to make sure you know, as Paul mentioned in the slideshow, to make sure that you know the rules for observers, where you're going, so that you actually know if someone's doing something, is it against the rules, or do you just not like it, but it is actually allowed? Because that's going to guide what makes sense for you to do. And then, because we know that there's a possibility this year of people showing up in vote counting centers in the days following the election for the purpose of disruption, we actually had a special training last weekend on nonviolent conflict response for vote count observers. And if you go to that link that Paul gave you and fill out the form at the bottom, one of the additional resources it will give you access to is the recording of that training, which has a bunch of other suggestions.
Excellent. Anybody have any questions at this point?
I just have one comment. In the scenario that was just explained, wouldn't you think that the officials there at the site would do something? I mean, it should.
Paula, yeah, in my experience, yes, they would. It depends what pressure they're under. If there's a lot of, I mean, I can picture situations where they don't want to call out the troublemaker until it gets to a fairly high level, because they don't want, just like I said, don't get into an argument with them. They don't want to get into an argument with the public. And so I could see that they might let somebody do an occasional shout and just try to not feed the energy and just let it go. Certainly, if there's anything unsafe going on, they're going to deal with it. If it's loud, they might not. And I think it's going to depend. I've been in big city and small city election offices, and I haven't seen anything terrible. But each one has its own style of how they deal with things.
Okay, thank you.
So you also were talking about ballot security as far as the computer systems. What kind of work are you doing in that space as far as ensuring that the computer systems remain safe?
Well, Scrutineers has made comments on federal legislation when that was being considered to improve things, hasn't passed. This project is just about observing, which is kind of too late to fix the computer systems. We do encourage people to observe the audits, which are an extra line of defense. I mean, computer security is never perfect. I mean, NSA, Office of Personnel Management, CIA, they've all been hacked. So it's not, so that's why audits, hand counting is really important. West Virginia has a fairly good system of checking every contest. Most states don't check every contest.
Yeah.
And so we have some information about observing audits, and we encourage people to observe audits. That doesn't really solve the cybersecurity. Emily may be able to add to this. We do have a training about the vulnerabilities of different systems, but that's kind of if your county or state is in getting ready to buy new systems, then there may be something helpful about which ones are safer than others. But they're all trying to live in the world we live in.
Let me just add, there's a really important lawsuit that's been brought in Georgia challenging the statewide system that they use there, which is extremely problematic in terms of election security. The lawsuit is, the main plaintiffs are Coalition for Good Governance. And one of the things that we're doing is whatever, whenever they ask us for support, to support them. So they often come and do an update on the lawsuit, and we ask for donations, and we promote their stuff on social media and that kind of thing. I really think that particular lawsuit is one of the best hopes that we have for getting the computer systems that count our votes to be more secure.
Okay. We'll go with Tony.
Well, first of all, Paul and Emily, I want to say thank you very much. I mean, what you've given us is very simple, but the details are great, and it's like a no-brainer. And we're never going to stop the cyber pirates, unfortunately. There's just too many of them. You're suggesting about burning a one-time CD and keeping that secure. Any way that we can eliminate the potential for cyber fraud or corruption is wonderful. And then, of course, as you do this, after this next election, you'll have some good R&D stuff. And by the next time around, we'll be able to tweak it even better. I say we, because even if I'm not involved with you, I still feel like part of the same team, because we really need this, and we need to get more people involved. We got to get them off the couch. But just like so many people who vote are threatened or get turned back at the polls, or they just see something that makes them uneasy, these people who are putting themselves in this line of work, they're at risk. How can we make them feel secure? What can we do for them other than a buddy system that allows them to walk into a polling place that has adverse circumstances marching up and down the sidewalk in front of them? Just the problems that a typical voter faces are going to be more compounded for these people who want to be observers. That's my opinion.
Thank you.
We'll go with Mike.
Thanks to Paul and Emily. Appreciate great information. What I'm wondering is, you talked about the impartial observers, mostly volunteers, I gather, and then people that are there observing on behalf of candidates. I've heard groups talk about, well, we should just show up there and tell them that we're going to observe. And Paul, you're talking about that you've been in a number of different vote counting centers. Do most of them have good security to make sure that only people who are properly approved and authorized to be there are present during the counting process?
I've observed in West Virginia and California and Bosnia. And both West Virginia and California allow anyone to observe during the vote counting process at the county office. So in West Virginia, it was a small county, and I've been in a couple counties, and they're both fairly small, although one was um, Berkeley, which is second biggest county in West Virginia, but still a relatively small county. And it wasn't crowded, and everybody was cordial. There are plenty of election workers there, and they would have no trouble calling the sheriff's office, which isn't far away, to to handle any issue that came up. In Ventura County in California, it's a much bigger county. The election office is down in the basement, so there's access. There's ways to see a crowd of people coming in and stop them before they get to the election office. And I think you often might see that in bigger counties, that they've thought about protecting things there too. They would have no trouble calling in plenty of sheriff's deputies if necessary.
Paul, I want as a follow-up, what role do you see? I think, as far as I know, of course, I'm here in Phoenix, and there was a lot of activity around our vote counting center, and including a lot of yahoos running around with AR-15s, and honest election workers had to be escorted to their car by the police, which is a sad state of affairs, in my opinion. But what role do you see, in addition to, in-person observers at that center? I'm pretty sure that there were around the clock 24-hour cameras. And then in the other incident at the Coliseum with the cyber ninjas, they decided which media they would permit or not permit. What role do you see, in addition to people, for the working press and for cameras that are omnipresent?
I know in my county in Ventura, California, they don't allow ordinary people to bring in cameras. They would probably let the press come in, but I'm not allowed to use my cell phone to record, or either audio or video. I think it's important to be able to let the press in, and cyber ninjas negotiated that over time, and I knew some of the people who were trying to observe, not part of the audit, but trying to get in to see things. And eventually they set up cameras, their own cameras, which showed the general layout of the floor. The value of observing is, and in the goal of the cyber ninja, well, I hope the goal of the cyber ninjas was to reassure the public that this is a serious effort to count the ballots. And so cameras serve that purpose, whether it's the press or ordinary people coming in. And in Berkeley County in West Virginia, I did video the process, the bringing in of the ballots. I asked permission, and they thought about it. They hadn't had that request before, but they said, sure, yeah, just don't get in the way, which is perfectly reasonable. In the big county where I am in now, they mark on the floor where the observers may stand. So it's quite limited, and they limit the number of people in at any one time. And to some extent, they're preventing future problems. It does limit what observers can see. So there's a trade-off there.
Do you think it'd be possible, Paul, to have a good system of video cameras, in addition to people observing, but to confirm or correct impressions, or to give a video record as to any allegation that might come up? Is that something that might be a real answer and help get away from some concerns?
Well, video cameras, it takes a lot of cameras to cover the entire flow in a large county. And it's the large counties that are going to switch results at the state or federal level. Where I am in Ventura County, they say they have security cameras at every point where the ballots are, but they broadcast on the web only some of those. So in the vote counting room, for example, they have the computers, and the batches of ballots come in and they run through the scanners. They have one camera high up on the wall, So you can see the people, you can see the scanners, you can see them moving around boxes of ballots, but there's not a camera on the keyboard that controls the computer. And you can see people come down and sit there, but you can't see what they're doing. Okay, so when they're checking signatures, that's done on screen, and they have a camera on the screen, so you can watch the signature, the original signature, the comparison signature. You can see them making judgments, and that's encouraging for public confidence. But it's that kind of level of detail that you would need in so many cameras. Now, I think one of the big issues is the storage of ballots. They've come in the mail, they're stored somewhere, and I know people have worried, well, it's the insiders could get in and change things. And in fact, it has happened over the centuries. So then you need cameras there, and security cameras can be hacked too, they're computers. So I don't think anything will be 100% fix, but I do agree with you that cameras have a believability. And that's part of what we're doing here, is we're certainly trying to catch malfeasance, and we're trying to create trust when the trust is deserved. And I think cameras have a big role in that.
Thank you.
So how much, in a given election, how much malfeasance is there? I mean, how many instances of vote fraud, election counting fraud are there?
The Brennan Center put out a report, I think in 2010, of inaccurate vote counts, inaccurate computer vote counts between 2002 and 2008. And I think it had a couple hundred. Now, the Heritage Foundation has a similar file, but that's not just the vote counts, that's anything. And I understand that a large fraction of them are absentee ballot malfeasance. Sometimes somebody, a husband signing for a wife, or parents signing for their children who are away and didn't actually vote, or vice versa. And they have many, maybe a couple thousand, but so is it ever enough to sway an election? It doesn't look like it, but we don't know if everything is caught.
So that answer that you gave, Paul, is about voter fraud, which I would agree with you is a very low level compared to the number of votes that there are. But what we're more concerned about is election fraud, and we don't really know how much of that there's been. And that's part of the problem with not having good enough audits on computers that are used to count our votes, is that we don't know when they're accurate or not. We're just told to trust them. And that's why we do the work that we do, is, it's part of it, is we're not willing to just trust. We want to improve voter confidence, but as Paul said, we want voters to trust the process when it's worthy of that trust. And so our work is to try to make it worthy of that trust.
Excellent. Any other questions we have out there? Well, do each of you want to do like a final statement talking about Scrutineers and pointing us to the right resources?
Emily, go for it.
I really want to thank you for having us and for everyone's good attention today. We are going to be doing this training again for anyone from the public who wants to come on Saturday, this Saturday, the 13th. And again on Wednesday, August 31st. So if you just go to if you want to tell anybody else about it, you can send them to scrutineers.org, and it's right there on the homepage. So the main 2 pages for you to know about are just our homepage to learn about us in general, scrutineers.org, and then put a /train1 after it to get to the page that has a video of a recorded version of this training, and also the transcript. If you're someone who absorbs information better by reading it, the transcript and the slides are there. And then all of the resources that we talked about in today's video, as well as a form to fill out to tell us that you want more, and we'll give you more. We've tried, there's a lot to the whole process. Each step of the process of determining who the winners of the election are has many things that we could say about it. And so we've tried to organize it in a way that you can find what you need to know without getting overwhelmed by the stuff that's maybe not applicable to the observing that you're going to do. So, if you fill out the form at the bottom of that page that Paul just put into the chat again, we'll give you access to more, and you'll get to choose which of it you actually want to look at.
Excellent. Yeah, again, that's scrutineers.org/train1. Scrutineer is SCRUTINEERS. And I want to thank both of you. Paul, do you want to have any final words?
No, Sarah's going to send out that same link and information to everybody signed up. And so I was really glad to have people, all the interest and good feedback.
Yeah, it's great stuff. I look forward. I've done poll working before. I've not done election observing as much. So I look forward to doing it. And I'll be doing it in Berkeley County, by the
Good.
way.
Yeah.
That's where I live. So, and Emily, as I'm a New Mexico, so I used to live in New Mexico. Graduated.
I'm actually in California. I just went there for that work in 2004.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, excellent. Thanks everyone for joining us. If you have any
David,
questions,
what's our next forum in the series? What's next on the schedule?
Next will be early voting later this month. So it'll be the last week of August.
yes. Yeah, so join us for the early voting citizens engagement forum. Thank you for joining us tonight. We'll leave the room open here for a few minutes if you have any questions or just want to hang out. So, but thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks so much, Paul.
Yeah,
and
thanks
really appreciate it.
everybody.
Nice to see everybody.
Yeah, good to see you, Tony.
Take care, everybody.